I heard another really good sermon the other day and I want to share it with you. Today we're going to be looking at David and Goliath at 1 Samuel 17. But we're going to look at it in a slightly different way than I've ever heard it preached on before. We're going to specifically be looking at the atmosphere that Goliath creates around himself. Interestingly enough, I've never read any other scripture about any of Goliath's fights other than the one he has with David, which of course, spoiler alert, he loses. That being said, however, I've read tons of scripture detailing Goliath's appearance and the atmosphere of fear that he creates around himself. He's called Ishhabanayim.
I'm just trying to flex on these
Israelites,
which is often translated as champion. However, it literally means the man of two spaces or the man in between, referring to a warrior who would step into space between two opposing armies to engage in a 1v1 combat and decide the outcome of a battle. There's also the word Gibor. Sorry if I butchered that pronunciation. Often translated as hero, it literally means mighty, strong, or powerful. It's more of a general term to describe bravery, strength, or valor. Also, little bonus word for you, Raphah or Raphaim, which is later described in 2 Samuel and 1 Chronicles. There are other translations, such as the ESV, for example, that translate this to descendants of giants or born to giants. The word Nephilim isn't used to describe Goliath. Goliath and his brothers are referenced as descendants of Raphah. The Bible doesn't explicitly name Goliath as Nephilim, but he does come from a lineage of giants, connecting his ancestry back to the Nephilim mentioned in Genesis. The term Raphah refers to people of unusually large stature, and their name became synonymous with giants in the Old Testament. Basically, that was an extremely long-winded way of saying he's a pretty big fella. Anyway, his height was 6 cubits and a span, which in the traditional Hebrew text would now translate to 9 feet and 9 inches tall. Other ancient manuscripts, like the Dead Sea Scrolls, for example, record his height as 4 cubits and a span. That's about 6 feet and 9 inches, which is still an incredibly imposing height for the time, considering the average height was about 5'3". The weight of his armor is also described, weighing 5,000 shekels, which only a mighty man could bear the weight of. So, we've established Goliath is a pretty big dude who's physically imposing and intimidating, but we still haven't read anything about him fighting yet. For 40 days, he comes out and issues a challenge to the Israelites. On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. And when they heard this message, the Israelites fled in great fear. The key sort of words I want to highlight there are hearing and words. They did not see Goliath fight anyone. They just saw a great big fella with a massive ego giving it large ones on the battlefield. Goliath created an atmosphere of fear. His stature, his size, his words that he used towards the Israelites caused them to cower in fear, until one man decided to change the atmosphere. The Israelites go from cowering in fear to charging forward at the enemy because David, the shepherd's son of a Bethlehemite servant, took a stand. One man with God on his side takes a stand, and an army goes from cowering in fear to charging towards the enemy. Is that not power? Is that not power? David decided not to be intimidated by the overwhelming atmosphere that Goliath had created. He decided to trust in God's limitless power rather than human limitations he would have taken on a heavyweight. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? I always found it amazing how he doesn't call him a giant, he doesn't call him Goliath, he calls him a man, and an uncircumcised man at that. And that will never not be funny to me as an extremely immature child, but let's not let my immaturity take away from why that part is actually so important. It's a profound insult used by the Israelites. Of course, it highlights the cultural difference, but it also highlights Goliath's position as an outsider to God. God ain't with Goliath. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. Again, reinforcing that I ain't calling him a giant. He's not calling him this great big man. He's calling him a Philistine. He's just calling him a man.
it's just some guy.
Some guy? Oh, he's just some guy.
David ain't worried. David ain't worried. David ain't worried at all about his size because he knows Goliath ain't with God and he knows God is with him. Again, reinforcing that ultimate trust in God's protection. David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. The contrast of Goliath being a massive bloke relying on a full arsenal of weapons with David's reliance on spiritual authority. I'm sorry, but tell me that is not power. Now, I could go on to a massive tangent right now and look at some of the Hebrew words, but it would literally appease only one of my viewers, and he doesn't cover the whole demographic. So I'll put something on screen of some stuff I found that I thought was quite interesting, and if you want to read it, you can pause it and look through. I'll also mention all of the ways that David prefigures Jesus in so many ways. If you don't know about typology and you want to expand your knowledge and understanding of just how cohesive and beautiful the Bible is, it's one of many ways you can do that, and I really suggest looking into it. To wrap this up, I want to ask you three main questions. Firstly, is there a Goliath in your life? Is there someone that's creating an atmosphere in your life that makes you feel full of fear, like the Israelites were before someone took a stand? Is there someone in your life extinguishing your fire, stopping you from evangelizing or serving the Lord or doing something to halt or damage your walk with Jesus? Are you a Goliath in someone else's life? Are people coming to you full of enthusiasm and you're sitting there with your fire extinguisher waiting to put them out? Have you stood there with your little sentence sniper waiting to shoot them down as soon as they feel on fire for the Lord because it's not how you want them to be? And finally, are you your own Goliath? Are you the one that creates the Goliath-like atmosphere in your life that makes you cower in fear and stop you from moving and taking action? Constantly overthinking stuff in your own head, leading to procrastination and ultimately stopping you from serving the Lord at all. Boxing yourself up in that mental HMP. You're behind bars when you create this Goliath-like atmosphere. Maybe stopping yourself from serving, or stopping yourself from growing spiritually, or stopping yourself from expanding your scriptural knowledge because you're scared, because you've created this fantasy within your mind of all the things that can go wrong and focused on your own human limitations rather than God's power. Now, of course, this video does sort of follow on from the last one I made, so if you want to check that out, I'll leave it on the screen now. David, 5'3", takes on a giant and wins because he has God on his side and he trusts in God rather than looking at the monumental odds stacked against him, all of his weapons, all of his size, all of his scary words and the atmosphere he creates. He just trusts in God. And really, the biggest lie you'll ever get told in your life is it is not that simple, because trust me, it really is. There was a little bit less scripture in this one. I kind of want to focus on small amounts of scripture at a time rather than just fire hosing verses at you and not really going over and explaining how we can apply it to modern day life. And with that being said, God bless you.